The myth of Orpheus. Many were the minstrels who, in the early days of the world, went amongst men, telling them stories of the gods, of their wars and their births, and of the beginning of things. Of all these minstrels, none was so famous as Orpheus. None could tell truer things about the gods. He himself was half divine, and there was some who said that he was in truth Apollo's son. But a great grief came to Orpheus, a grief that stopped his singing and his playing upon the lyre. His young wife, Eurydice, was taken from him. One day, walking in the garden, she was bitten on the heel by a serpent. Straightway she went down to the world of the dead. Then everything in this world was dark and bitter for the minstrel of the gods. Sleep would not come to him, and for him food had no taste. Then Orpheus said, "I will do that which no mortal has ever done before. I will do that which even the immortals might shrink from doing. I will go down into the world of the dead, and I will bring back to the living and to the light my bride, Eurydice." Then Orpheus went on his way to the cavern which goes down, down to the world of the dead, the cavern Tainaron. The trees showed him the way. As he went on, Orpheus played upon his lyre and sang. The trees heard his song and were moved by his grief, and with their arms and their heads they showed him the way to the deep, deep cavern named Tainaron. Down, down, down by a winding path Orpheus went. He came at last to the great gate that opens upon the world of the dead, and the silent guards who kept watch there for the rulers of the dead were astonished when they saw a living being coming towards them, and they would not let Orpheus approach the gate. The minstrel took the lyre in his hands and played upon it. As he played, the silent watchers gathered around him, leaving the gate unguarded. And as he played, the rulers of the dead came forth, Hades and Persephone, and listened to the words of the living man. "The cause of my coming through the dark and fearful ways," sang Orpheus, "is to strive again a fairer fate for Eurydice, my bride. All that is above must come down to you at last, O rulers of the most lasting world. But before her time has Eurydice been brought here. I have desired strength to endure her loss, but I cannot endure it. And I have come before you, Hades and Persephone, brought here by love." When Orpheus said the name of love, Persephone, the queen of the dead, bowed her young head, and bearded Hades, the king, bowed his head also. Persephone remembered how Demeter, her mother, had sought her all through the world, and she remembered the touch of her mother's tears upon her face. And Hades remembered how his love for Persephone had led him to carry her away from the valley where she had been gathering flowers. Then he and Persephone stood aside, and Orpheus went through the gate and came amongst the dead. Still upon his lyre he played. Tantalos, who for his crime had been condemned to stand up to his neck in water, and yet never be able to assuage his thirst, Tantalos heard, and for a while did not strive to put his lips toward the water that ever flowed away from him. Sisyphus, who had been condemned to roll up a hill a stone that ever rolled back, Sisyphus heard the music that Orpheus played, and for a while he sat still upon his stone. Ixion, bound to a wheel, stopped its turning for a while. The vultures abandoned their torment of Tityos. The daughters of Danaos ceased to fill their jars, even those dread ones, the Eurydice, who bring to the dead the memories of all their crimes and all their faults, had their cheeks wet with tears. In the throng of the newly come dead, Orpheus saw Eurydice. She looked upon her husband, but she had not the power to come near him. But slowly she came when Hades the king called her. Then with joy Orpheus took her hands. It would be granted them, no mortal ever gained such privilege before, to leave both together the world of the dead, and to abide for another space in the world of the living. One condition there would be, that on their way up neither Orpheus nor Eurydice should look back. They went through the gate and came out amongst the watchers that are around the portals. These showed them the path that went up to the world of the living. That way they went, Orpheus and Eurydice, he going before her. Up and through the darkened ways they went, Orpheus knowing that Eurydice was behind him, but never looking back upon her. As he went, his heart was filled with things to tell her, how the trees were blossoming in the garden she had left, how the water was sparkling in the fountain, how the doors of the house stood open, how they, sitting together, would watch the sunlight on the laurel bushes. All these things were in his heart to tell her who came behind him, silent and unseen. And now they were nearing the place where the cavern opened on the world of the living. Orpheus looked up towards the light from the sky. Out of the opening of the cavern he went. He saw a white winged bird fly by. He turned around and cried, "O Eurydice, look upon the world I have won you back to." He turned to say this to her. He saw her with her long dark hair and pale face. He held out his arms to clasp her, but in that instant she slipped back into the gloom of the cavern, and all he heard spoken was a single word: farewell. Long, long had it taken Eurydice to climb so far, but in the moment of his turning around she had fallen back to her place amongst the dead, for Orpheus had looked back. Back through the cavern Orpheus went again. Again he came before the watchers of the gate. But now he was not looked at nor listened to. Hopeless, he had returned to the world of the living. The birds were his friends now, and the trees and the stones. The birds flew around him and mourned with him. The trees and stones often followed him, moved by the music of his lyre. But a savage band slew Orpheus and threw his severed head and his lyre into the river Hebrus. It is said by the poets that while they floated in midstream, the lyre gave out some mournful notes, and the head of Orpheus answered the notes with song. And now that he was no longer to be counted with the living, Orpheus went down to the world of the dead, going down straightway. The silent watchers let him pass. He went amongst the dead, and he saw his Eurydice in the throng. Again they were together, Orpheus and Eurydice, and them the Erinyes could not torment with memories of crimes and faults.